This is about Putin and the reason is what people don't understand. This isn't about Putin being a dictator for life. This is about Putin recognizing the problems that faced Russia. Russia was a destroyed nation in the 1990s, was collapsed. They call it the catastrophe for a reason. Putin's job was to bring Russia out of this. 2007 was only 7 years after the disaster. 5 years, only 2 years after the end of the Chechen conflict. Corruption is still rampant. And Putin knows that, but Putin knows that you can't change things overnight. It takes time. You have to work at all the governor, at all the regions. You have to get things working. You can't stamp out corruption if the economy doesn't function. So you have to tolerate a certain amount of corruption until you get an economy functioning. Once you get an economy functioning, you have taxes flowing in that can pay pensions and do infrastructure. Then you can do things like, let's start tightening the rule of law. Let's start getting that in there, and we'll get corruption out, and we'll do that. But if you start right off the bat with get rid of corruption, and you pull the oligarchs, who are the only people with any economic sense at that point in time, out of it, the economy will collapse. It's as simple as it gets. So Putin has taken the long, slow approach, and he says, we're not ready yet. We're not ready for me to step aside. Because another reason why is, who's going to replace me? Well, the CIA, the State Department, the British intelligence have been trying to create an opposition to replace him. And in 2007, they tried to do a color revolution. Navalny was part of this. He was part of this youth mobilization group that was supposed to replicate what happened in Ukraine in the Orange Revolution, and it failed. Navalny then went into, his I guess they call it shareholder activism phase, where he's exposing corruption. And then he gets tapped to go to Yale. And this is where my article ends up. Because part 2 is coming. Yale, let me just tell you what it was. It was a CIA grooming and training operation. He went there. There's a guy in his class who is a former intelligence guy who is the spotter, who arranges it. Navalny gets in with the Americans. One of the things he did while he's at Yale, this cultural thing and all that, he starts his attack. He's in Yale in November of 2010 when he starts releasing documents about corruption of Transneft, I think it was called, a big thing. And then when he came back in December, he started to pile on. This was a targeted operation by the United States to use Navalny to destroy the credibility of Vladimir Putin in the lead up to the critical 2012 presidential election. They didn't want Putin to come back in. They were trying to destroy Putin's reputation so that Dmitry Medvedev would say, I have no choice but to remain president. It was a CIA operation from the get-go, and Navalny was a CIA asset. So that's why anybody who sits there and says he's a patriot, no, he is a controlled CIA asset who is a traitor to Russia. But the Russians, first of all, you got to say Medvedev's sort of Medvedev for a moment thought he was going to be, then he didn't want Putin. Medvedev was like, I like the idea of staying president. And Putin, meanwhile, as prime minister, going, that ain't going to happen. But don't worry about it, Dmitry, you're not going to be president. But Dmitry was playing the game. So Dmitry actually facilitated Navalny's work, allowed it to happen, allowed it to go on. It wasn't until 2011 when Putin made the phone call and said, no, that ain't going to happen, that they started to tune the screws on Navalny. They knew that if they called him a CIA asset and all this kind of stuff, that wasn't the way to take him down. The right way to take him down was through corruption. Here's Mr. Anti-Corruption, and suddenly they got the goods on him, because back when he didn't make any money, before he went to Yale, he had to go to Kirov. And he was brought in there by the governor, who he knew as an opposition politician before. And the idea was to look at the economic efficiency of some industry. The one that was Kirov Lys, which is the forestry, the timber. Navalny comes in, meets with the director, and says, the problem is all your boys in your 36 lumber mills are cutting timber on the side contracts, and selling it for direct cash that's going in their pockets. It's not being reported to the company ledger, and you're losing money. This is why you look so bad. You're cutting trees, but you ain't making any money. The way you're going to make money is I'm going to bring my best friend here, and he's going to set up an intermediary, and he's a trading company, and you're going to give him lumber, at a good market rate, and then he's going to sell it. We get a 7% commission, but then that money that we make goes on your ledgers and you make money. And the guy's going, but I guess you're from the governor. So, okay, if that's what the governor wants. Well, it was a money-making scheme for Navalny because they were getting the timber at very low prices, and then they'd go out there and sell them at high prices, pocket not only the difference, but the 7% commission. And that money wasn't going in. They were still losing money. Navalny and his buddy were making money. And then here's the kicker. Navalny does all this, and then in July, the governor says, run an audit on them. So Navalny runs the audit. They fail the audit. And the manager is fired for mismanagement and all that. And then Navalny closes his trading company and returns to Moscow with a whole bunch of money in his pocket. He's a corrupt mother, you know what? But, everybody in Russia was. I'm just telling you, the only way you lived in Russia at that time was to have little schemes going on like that because they weren't ready for the real deal. This is what Putin recognized. We have work to do. So now the Russians turn the screws on this and now becomes a corrupt guy. And that was the beginning and the end of him because the Russians, again, were just basically saying, you're not going to get to play the CIA game. But Navalny, the CIA owned him. So he kept trying to play the game. He tried to disrupt where they really cut him down was the 2021 constitutional reforms. The CIA told him to disrupt that again, to attack Putin, to bring down the constitutional reforms, because this would allow Putin now to extend the stay. He wouldn't have to leave. He could do 2 more 6-year terms, give him 12 years. And the United States is going, we don't want 12 more years of Putin. He has to go. Navalny, it's your job. But he couldn't do it. He was arrested. He was given probation. The Russians were sort of being nice to him. And then the whole Novichok thing comes up. And I'll talk about that. But let me just put it this way. The German medical records show that there was no Novichok involved. It's a manufactured thing. What probably happened, most likely, is that Navalny deliberately overdosed on antidepressants to create a physical collapse that then could get him, together with British intelligence, German intelligence, and American intelligence, out of Russia, which they successfully pulled off. Then he has a miraculous recovery because Novichok, of course, is the most deadly substance known to man. Even a whiff of it kills 1 million people. But nope, Navalny miraculously survived. In December, he ends up in the Black Forest at a CIA-run documentary film production company where they produced 2 documentaries in the span of a month. Now, Danny and Andrei, I've made documentary films. I made one back about weapons of mass destruction. I'm making one right now. You can't make a documentary film in a month. I'm just telling you right now, especially when you bring in sophisticated computer-generated graphics and all this kind of stuff. The CIA already had it all packaged up. They had a whole support thing going in. They produced these movies. Now, these movies were designed to destroy the credibility of Vladimir Putin. But now, how do you do that? Well, what you have to do is the guy who made the movie is going to go back to Russia. And everybody's saying, but you're going to get arrested. Yes, I'm going to get arrested, but then you're going to release the movie. Putin's going to be discredited. It's going to destroy him. He's going to be swept out of power, and I will be released, and I will be the hero. I will be the next president of Russia. 2 movies. One was Putin's Palace, which was the total fabrication about something. It fell apart immediately. It's really bad work by the CIA. The second one was Navalny, which ended up winning an Academy Award. Yay. But the problem is Navalny went back, and the Russians went, we're sort of being nice to you, but we're no longer going to be nice to you. You're going to jail. Not only are you going to jail, we're going to pile on this another corruption thing because you're a corrupt guy. We know it. Boom. Extremism. Boom. And a 2-year suspended sentence turned into a 30-year life sentence in prison. And he's done. He's not getting out. Now, then what happens? This is the thing. And I don't know. There's a lot of speculation, but let me put it this way. His death was not coincidental. The West was too front loaded on this one. You had the boyfriend of Navalny 4 days prior saying, that we need a game-changing event coming out of prison in order for this to work. Well, game-changing thing, he's dead. His lawyer met with him 2 days before and gave him medicine. And then Navalny drops dead. So I call it my Frankie Five Angels moment. Godfather 2, near the end of the movie. Frankie Five Angels.
Intel services special services always operate within the realms of the organized crime and lawyers who work for it. It's classics, It's a modus operandi of the intelligence services. You don't have to have any serious intelligence, even background like Scott does, to understand that. How do you proceed, when you want to subvert or recruit somebody? Well, guess what? Organized crime is the best way. And believe me, even with the much more improved system of the control of the criminality in Russia and obviously of the penitentiary system, guess what? They still, communicate between each other. There are certainly corrupt guards in there. There are certainly communications with the outside world. So it's not that difficult to, kill the guy by different means. In the end, there is always, while he was in the, he wasn't really, he was in general colony, what it's called. So yeah, there's always could be set up something. Some people who are very, they know that they are pretty much for life sentence. They might just, shank him and that's it. But here it was probably some chemical involved, and voila, there you go. So it's not that difficult, especially for the figure of such public profile in the West. And